Chapter 15 of the Old Curiosity Shop. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recorded by Mill Nicholson. The Old Curiosity Shop by Charles Dickens. Chapter 15. Often, while they were yet pacing the silent streets of the town on the morning of their departure, the child trembled with a mingled sensation of hope and fear, as in some far-off figure, imperfectly seen in the clear distance, her fancy traced a likeness to honest Kit. But although she would gladly have given him her hand, and thanked him for what he had said at their last meeting, it was always a relief to find, when they came nearer to each other, that the person who approached was not he, but a stranger. For even if she had not dreaded the effect which the sight of him might have wrought upon her fellow traveller, she felt that to bid farewell to anybody now, and most of all to him who had been so faithful and so true, was more than she could bear. It was enough to leave dumb things behind and objects that were insensible both to her love and sorrow. To have parted from her only other friend upon the threshold of that wild journey would have wrung her heart indeed. Why is it that we can better bear to part in spirit than in body, and while we have the fortitude to act farewell, have not the nerve to say it? On the eve of long voyages, or an absence of many years, friends who are tenderly attached will separate with the usual look, the usual pressure of the hand, planning one final interview for the morrow, while each well knows that it is but a poor feint to save the pain of uttering that one word, and that the meeting will never be. Should possibilities be worse to bear than certainties? We do not shun our dying friends. The not having distinctly taken leave of one among them, whom we left in all kindness and affection, will often embitter the whole remainder of a life. The town was glad with morning light. Places that had shone ugly and distrustful all night long now wore a smile, and sparkling sunbeams dancing on chamber windows and twinkling through blind and curtain before sleepers' eyes, shed light even into dreams, and chased away the shadows of the night. Birds in hot rooms, covered up close and dark, felt it was morning, and chafed and grew restless in their little cells. Bright-eyed mice crept back to their tiny homes and nestled timidly together. The sleek house-cat, forgetful of her prey, sat winking at the rays of sun starting through keyhole and cranny in the door, and longed for her stealthy run and warm sleek bask outside. The nobler beasts confined in dens stood motionless behind their bars and gazed on fluttering boughs, and sunshine peeping through some little window, with eyes in which old forests gleamed, then trod impatiently the track their prisoned feet had worn, and stopped and gazed again. Men in their dungeons stretched their cramped cold limbs, and cursed the stone that no bright sky could warm. The flowers that sleep by night opened their gentle eyes and turned them to the day. The light, creation's mind, was everywhere, and all things owned its power. The two pilgrims, often pressing each other's hands or exchanging a smile or cheerful look, pursued their way in silence. Bright and happy as it was, there was something solemn in the long deserted streets, from which, like bodies without souls, all habitual character and expression had departed, leaving but one dead uniform repose that made them all alike. All was so still at that early hour, that the few pale people whom they met seemed as much unsuited to the scene as the sickly lamp, which had been here and there left burning, was powerless and faint in the full glory of the sun. Before they had penetrated very far into the labyrinth of men's abodes which yet lay between them and the outskirts, this aspect began to melt away, and noise and bustle to usurp its place. Some straggling carts and coaches rumbling by first broke the charm, then others came, then others yet more active, then a crowd. The wonder was, at first, to see a tradesman's window open, but it was a rare thing soon to see one closed. Then smoke rose slowly from the chimneys, and sashes were thrown up to let in air, and doors were opened, and servant girls, looking lazily in all directions but their brooms, scattered brown clouds of dust into the eyes of shrinking passengers, or listened disconsolately to milkmen who spoke of country fairs, and told of waggons in the mews, with awnings and all things complete, and gallant swains to boot, which another hour would see upon their journey. This quarter past, they came upon the haunts of commerce and great traffic, where many people were resorting and business was already rife. The old man looked about him with a startled and bewildered gaze, for these were places that he hoped to shun. He pressed his finger on his lip, and drew the child along by narrow courts and winding ways, nor did he seem at ease until they had left it far behind, often casting a backward look towards it, murmuring that ruin and self-murder were crouching in every street, and would follow if they scented them, and that they could not fly too fast. Again this quarter past, they came upon a straggling neighbourhood, where the mean houses parcelled off in rooms, and windows patched with rags and paper, told of the populous poverty that sheltered there. The shops sold goods that only poverty could buy, and sellers and buyers were pinched and griped alike. Here were poor streets, where faded gentility essayed with scanty space and shipwrecked means to make its last feeble stand, but tax-gatherer and creditor came there as elsewhere, and the poverty that yet faintly struggled was hardly less squalid and manifest than that which had long ago submitted and given up the game. This was a wide, wide track, for the humble followers of the camp of wealth pitched their tents round about it for many a mile, but its character was still the same. Damp, rotten houses, many to let, many yet building, many half-built and mouldering away, lodgings where it would be hard to tell which needed pity most, those who let or those who came to take. Children, scantily fed and clothed, spread over every street, and sprawling in the dust, scolding mothers stamping their slipshod feet with noisy threats upon the pavement, shabby fathers hurrying with dispirited looks to the occupation which brought them daily bread and little more, mangling women, washerwomen, cobblers, tailors, chandlers, driving their trades in parlours and kitchens and back room and garrets, and sometimes all of them under the same roof. Brickfields skirting gardens paled with staves of old casks, or timber pillaged from houses burnt down, and blackened and blistered by the flames, mounds of dockweed, nettles, coarse grass, and oyster shells, heaped in rank confusion, small dissenting chapels to teach, with no lack of illustration, the miseries of earth, and plenty of new churches erected with as little superfluous wealth to show the way to heaven. At length these streets, becoming more straggling yet, dwindled and dwindled away until there were only small garden patches bordering the road, with many a summer house innocent of paint and built of old timber or some fragments of a boat, green as the tough cabbage stalks that grew about it, and grottoed at the seams with toadstools and tight-sticking snails. To these succeeded pert cottages, 2 and 2, with plots of ground in front, laid out in angular beds, with stiff box borders and narrow paths between, where footstep never strayed to make the gravel rough. Then came the public house, freshly painted in green and white, with tea gardens and a bowling green, spurning its old neighbour with the horse trough where the waggons stopped. Then fields, and then some houses, one by one, of goodly size, with lawns, some even with a lodge, where dwelt a porter and his wife. Then came a turnpike, then fields again with trees and haystacks, then a hill, and on the top of that the traveller might stop and, looking back at old St. Paul's looming through the smoke, its cross peeping above the cloud, if the day were clear, and glittering in the sun, and casting his eyes upon the Babel out of which it grew, until he traced it down to the furthest outposts of the invading army of bricks and mortar, whose station lay for the present nearly at his feet, might feel at last that he was clear of London. Near such a spot as this, and in a pleasant field, the old man and his little guide, if guide she were who knew not whither they were bound, sat down to rest. She had had the precaution to furnish her basket with some slices of bread and meat, and here they made their frugal breakfast. The freshness of the day, the singing of the birds, the beauty of the waving grass, the deep green leaves, the wild flowers, and the thousand exquisite scents and sounds that floated in the air, deep joys to most of us, but most of all to those whose life is in a crowd, or who live solitarily in great cities, as in the bucket of a human well, sunk into their breasts, and made them very glad.